So what is a phrasal verb? A phrasal verb is a verb made up of 2 or 3 words. So there's usually a verb that we know, plus a preposition, and then the meaning of this new combination is completely different. So here are 3 verbs that we will learn today in this video. Now, look at this sentence. Can you use one of these verbs to finish this sentence? So we'll see this sentence later on in this video and you'll find out which is the correct verb to use. So thanks very much for joining me again on English with Archie. Today we are learning important phrasal verbs in English for competitive exams, for IELTS, for writing, also generally just for levelling up your English. So let's get started. So our first phrasal verb is look into. Now this is inseparable, so we can't move into, away from look in the sentence. So to look into something means to examine the facts of a situation. For example, the company is looking into selling its products abroad. So it's doing research on this topic. So our next word is account for. Now, account for is again inseparable and it means to form the total of something. So for example, Chinese students account for at least 30% of the university's population. Now account for also means to explain the reason for something. So we could say, that's a great point, but it doesn't account for why so many young people are leaving the UK. So it doesn't tell us the reason for this. Okay? Now our next word is allude to. Allude to. Now allude to again is inseparable and it means when we hint at something, we suggest we are thinking about something or referring to something or someone, but we don't say their name or we don't say specifically what we're talking about. So for example, the counsellor alluded to some difficult conversations that he was having. However, he didn't really tell us what the topic of them was. So he didn't tell us what the topic of these discussions were, but he suggested that there were some difficult discussions going on. So our next word is bring on. Now this one's separable, so we can move on away from bring in the sentence. Now, bring on means to cause a bad consequence, and most of the time we use it when talking about illness. So for example, his heart condition was brought on by his lifestyle. Now that's a passive sentence. The active sentence would be his lifestyle brought on his heart condition. His lifestyle brought it on. Now our next word is bring up, which again is separable. Bring up means to mention something, to bring something up in a conversation. So for example, the boss brought up some possible problems with the project. So he mentioned them, he brought them up, he started talking about these possible problems. Our next word is come about. So come about means to happen. So for example, the steady rise in unemployment has come about through a serious lack of government support. So it's happened because of a lack of government support. Our next word is put forward. Now put forward is separable and it means to put forward an idea, to suggest an idea, to make a suggestion. So for example, the council has put forward several ideas for how to combat the housing crisis in the city. So they have made a few different suggestions for how to improve the situation. Our next word is carry out, and this one is separable. So carry out means to complete something or to be in the process of doing something. So for example, we're carrying out many changes to the building at the moment, inside and out. So it means we're making some changes to our building, maybe some construction changes, and maybe you can't come into the building at the moment. I'm sorry, because we're carrying out some changes. So our next one is take on. Now first, this is separable, and I have two different meanings to give you for take on. So the first one is to challenge an opponent. So you can take on someone in a fight, or we could say, we're a small business, but we're ready to take on the big companies. So we're ready to fight against them. We're ready to compete against them. Now the other meaning of take on is to begin to deal with something. So for example, he's taken on some new responsibilities in the office. Turn out. Now this is a separable verb. Turn out usually means to prove to be in the end. So how is something at the end? So for example, I really didn't like him at first, but in the end it turned out I was wrong. He's actually a really nice guy. Or it turned out to be a mistake to reduce our number of staff. We're busier than ever. So at the end, we found out that actually it was a bad idea. Or in the first example, I found out that I was wrong. Now that brings me to my next word, which is find out. Now this is a separable verb, and this means to discover something, to learn some information. So, as I said before, I found out I was wrong. I discovered that. But another example would be, his boss found out he was stealing from the till. Or, how did you find out about our company? We don't advertise. Now our next word is go on. Now this is inseparable, and it means to happen in general. So for example, I like to know what's going on in the world, so I read the newspaper every day. It can also mean to continue. So for example, the automobile industry can't go on if the government doesn't give it some assistance. Now our next word is pick up. This is separable. So the meaning of this word is to increase in amount or in speed. So for example, the number of applications, I think they'll pick up in autumn. Or his career really picked up after he studied his MA at university. So our next word is to come up with. This is inseparable, so we keep all three words next to each other. Now, it means to have an idea. So, for example, the government has come up with a great idea to combat pollution in our cities. So the government has had a great idea. They have thought of a great idea. They have made up this great idea. So our next word is end up. So it's inseparable, so we keep these words together. Now it means to reach a particular place or situation after doing other things, after other activities. So for example, we ended up in the wrong town. We should have used the sat-nav. Or, after his terrible behaviour at work, he ended up being fired. Now our next word is map out. Now map out is separable, and map out means to plan something in detail. So for example, we've mapped out a way to beat all the competition and become the main company in the building sector. So we've come up with a plan, okay? So our next word is narrow down, and this is a separable verb, so it can move down away from narrow in the sentence. Now, this means to reduce a list by taking away the worst options and leaving the best options. So, for example, I've narrowed down the list of possible holiday destinations for our group, and I've left the ones which I think will be the most popular. So I've removed the ones which I don't think people will agree on, and I've left the ones which I think people will agree on. So we just have 2 or 3 options now. Now our next word is put off. Now again, put off is separable, and this means to delay something, especially something that we don't really want to do. For example, I could say to someone, you can't put it off any longer, you just need to meet up with her. I know you don't want to do it, but you can't put it off anymore. Our next word is run by, which is also separable. So to run something by someone means to check an idea with someone, usually for their approval before we do it. So for example, you might want to just run that idea by him and see what he thinks. Or, I would really like to run some ideas by you and get your thoughts. And our last verb today is verge on, which is inseparable. We can't separate these two words. So, to verge on something means to almost be something, and it's usually something very bad or something very good. So for example, the minister's comments verged on unacceptable. Now we also have the phrase on the verge of, which we can use in the same way. So, for example, the laboratory was on the verge of a great breakthrough. They were just about to have a great breakthrough. Okay, so that's it, but before you go, homework. Take 3 of the phrasal verbs from our lesson today and write 3 sentences and put them in the comments below. Now, subscribe to my channel, click the notifications button, and you'll get notifications about all my new videos. I also have my Instagram, English with Archie, and I put new words and new expressions on there. I do that every day, so you can continue to learn. And that's it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below, and I will see you next time. Bye!